Do you know what was happening in 1994, Greg or Pablo?
1994. Not off the
The
top of my
big
head.
theme around retirement was switching from pensions to 401k.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
remember that because that was, I'm dating myself, but that was the year I started working. I
Hmm.
was in this management training program and we did this rotation in HR and we were introducing a 401k plan for the first time. And there
Mhm.
was much discussion about it. You know, people who had been working for some time were really concerned and upset about losing their pensions. People like me were independent Gen Xers were like, this is great. We have control over things.
Right.
I think the results have been mixed. The point of that story is around that time, the responsibility for making sure your retirement funds lasted shifted from your employer to you as the individual. So that's when people like Bill Bengen started to look at how long your portfolio is going to last. What can we really take out? Because the market fluctuates year to year, right?
You're kind of talking about this idea of when you're there, what is that baseline that you can really count on? I didn't know that this was something that started in 94, right? Like 94, I'm like a freshman in high school. And by the time I graduated college, 401k was just a thing that
Yeah, true.
everybody
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, I assume that it's not the case for people that work with you because they're serious about getting to retirement. But I wonder in the industry that you're in, right? Like, is there talk about how well it's working out for American people of taking retirement into their own hands? Like, is there anybody that's out there kind of like beating the drum of, okay, in 1994, we thought we could switch to this. It's time to switch to something else, or time to like rethink this thing based on results? Because the headlines that we've kind of been diving into lately have basically told us that something like 36% of millennials think that they're going to reach retirement or like won't reach retirement
Hmm.
comfortably. And that's the generation that sees it the best. But from your perspective and your industry's perspective, what is the chatter on this decision of switching to from pensions to like now putting it in your own hands and like the level of urgency around having to rethink that?
Yeah, I don't know that it's being led by the financial services industry necessarily. I think the financial services industry answered with different types of products, 401k, paycheck replacement type ideas, annuities, different types of products that would sort of replace that predictability of a pension. I think that was the initial answer. What I see now seems to be more around social policy, where I think there are questions around has that worked? I read something recently about some of the major companies are starting to introduce pensions again for the first time. And they may not be pensions of old, you know, where they're completely replacing your income, but there's a baseline level of pension and then there's 401k on top of that. And so what I see is more of a social, you know, question and I think a policy question. And then I see bigger companies starting to address that in terms of benefits for their employees and employee wellness so that they can attract employees.
Raises some interesting questions because if you think back to the late 80s, early 90s, pensions were ubiquitous and Social Security was funded. I don't know what they looked at in 1994 if they thought it was going to be funded for forever or whatever, but I can tell you that today it's a lot less stable than what it was then. So, you know, you no longer have pensions, right? For most companies, people's retirement accounts are in their own hands, which for some is a really great advantage.
Mhm.
For some who are part of our community and who are not your average investors, you know, that's can be an advantage. You can certainly gain because of that, but there's a huge population that it is hurt because it's not done for them like it was. And then you compound the fact that Social Security, you know, none of us believe that it's going to be there when retirement age is upon us because it's not funded. You know, you take those two components away, you start to think about the social implications of that. And, you know, you can paint a pretty concerning picture for the
Yeah,
state of our.
as a amateur behavioral economist, you look at this change in what's required and what we're able to do. And to Kelly's point, I think the financial services responded how they should. Hey, let's make some products for this so that if you're on top of this, that's what's gonna, we can facilitate it. But I think there's a whole question, beyond all of that, which isn't just like what products are available, but what is the decision making architecture that gets you to being able to use these products, right? Like we're very familiar with 401ks, and there's data behind this idea that if the company defaults you into a 401k versus electing into a 401k, you're going to be better off for retirement, overall. And then now that means that, okay, so now people are going to be planning their retirement around specific products and specific like levers that get you into that already. And where does that leave real estate, right? Like, I think that makes it interesting on the problem that JWB solves for, which is right now you figured out how to allow folks that don't want to be real estate investors to invest in real estate as passively as possible. But in order to really make all the assets that are now on the table available for all, there is, the decision-making architecture and the ease of use and who gets to opt into this stuff and how easily starts to really guide how you can retire, I guess. Does that make sense, Kelly? Like, it's how you can retire that it starts to guide that stuff?
Yeah, I think that's always been a little bit of a question. I mean, but if you had a pension, it was sort of solved for you. Now, like I told you, I'm an independent Gen Xer. I don't like to be controlled by companies. So when I started, I was like, it's fine with me. And I love the 401k. And also, like, I can take it with me. If I leave this company, I'm not obligated to work here for 30 years
Mhm.
just to get my pension. So I think it's just gotten more complex, frankly. I think if you were happy with that path and it was available to you, plenty of people were comfortable with that. Plenty of people would be independent, built their own companies, changed companies, had to come up with their own retirement plan to begin with. So I don't know, that's really changed. It's just that these sort of rails, if you will, aren't there the way that they used to be. You
Right.
used to have a train track and now your plane can go any direction.
Mhm.
You can fly at different altitudes, you can fly at different speeds. So I think it's just gotten a lot more complex. And we're talking earlier, it's not just the products. I think that's part of how financial planning as a practice was born, right? Because I'm not selling a specific product anymore. Now I'm looking holistically about where you're trying to go. And maybe it's not a linear path. Maybe you're not going to work for 30 years and then quit together and totally go hang out on the beach. Maybe maybe you're going to work for 15, you're going to build up some assets and then you're going to change careers, or you're going to take a break, or life can happen, or lots of different things. So I think it's much more about sort of your values as an individual, as an investor, who you have to take care of yourself, for your family, what you're planning for, creating as using everything that's available to you and getting all of your levers sort of pointed in the right direction so that you have as many options available. And yes, we can come up with like a specific number as a starting point, and a conservative number that if you get there, you can feel pretty confident you have options. But I think the whole plan picture has gotten more complex, which makes our discipline like even more important.
That makes a lot of sense.